Thank you all. I am so excited to be here. I have heard about this conference for years and never thought I'd get asked to speak, so thank you all. I'm going to talk about playing with engineering, which, as Alex says, is maybe a little different than the usual talk. These two words don't always go together. Maybe they should go together more, both in industry and academia. Hopefully I can convince you of that. My name is AnnMarie Thomas, and I teach at the University of St. Thomas, which I didn't pick just because of the only having to write one word there. But in Minnesota, not the islands. But the work I'm going to show is the work out of my research lab. And I run a fairly unusual research lab at the university. Typically, we have about 25 to 30 research students on payroll. None of them are graduate students. They're undergraduates from about 12 different majors. And we play together. This is some of the alums and current students. The work I show, it's theirs. I don't take the credit for the good stuff. That's all them. So let's look at these words. What is play and what is engineering? Has anyone out there never used either of these words in a sentence? Right? You've used them. Hopefully, definitely engineering, I hope play. But have you ever tried to actually define the two of them? Try this sometime. Try to define them. I'm an academic, so there's lots of, let's do the literature review. There are still people writing papers about both those words and what are they. So we kind of know what it is, but they're a little nebulous sometimes. And maybe why should you as Strange Loop, why should you even care what they are and how they apply to each other? I hope you do, or it's going to be a really long 43 minutes. Let me start with why I care. And I kept changing this talk the more I watched other people's keynotes and other people's talks at Strange Loop's past. And it's like, okay, well, I got to give a little background here, because usually there's assumptions made of when you hear someone's a professor. So I'm going to start with this picture. I'm old enough that we don't have cell phone cameras. This is me. I won the kindergarten Best in the School science fair. I grew mold on bread. It grew really well in my dad's office. He wasn't thrilled about that. I show this because maybe there's an assumption that this is the first of a long string of awards for academics. This is the last academic award, I think, of my life. Fair assessment. It goes downhill from a traditional academic standpoint from this moment in early 80s. This is me in first grade, and this was a math assignment where we had to do a histogram of everyone's pets in the class. And I remember making all the little cutouts. I probably spent more time on the art part of it than the math part of it. That was the part that was exciting to me. So I followed that part. I ended up going to a high school where I majored in painting and acting, and I had to figure out what to do for college. And I somehow convinced myself that this was a true statement. This is the first line of my college application essay. I want to go to MIT because I've always wanted to be an actress. And I stand by this. As an actress, thankfully, I'm old enough that there aren't a lot of videos of me performing as an actress, because there's a reason I didn't get any scholarships to acting school. Someone told me what to say, how to say it, where to stand, when to stand. And engineering, I thought, in my 17-year-old brain, this is a fine art. This is something I can go and be super creative. This is pre-internet. I didn't have a cell phone, obviously. So I was shocked to get in. But then when I got in, I memorized every paper that came to our house. Do you remember mail? Wasn't email. And so I spent my summer reading everything. Couldn't believe I was going to this school. Was terrified. And then a thick packet came one day as I was heading off to work at the ice cream parlor on the island I live on. And it was for freshmen coming to MIT. And you can probably imagine exactly what it said, right? The cool welcome letter from a club. This was actually in text. So imagine the girl with pigtails who is leaving her tiny Quaker high school, about to go to the school she's afraid of, and the students, they got my address, they sent this. MIT certainly lowers standards for women underrepresented minorities. The average woman at MIT is less intelligent and ambitious than the average man at MIT. So that was great. There was no internet I could check to see if other people were upset. I was like, oh, this is, see, I knew they'd find out I didn't belong here. Of course, this club doesn't exist anymore. They got in trouble, but the damage is done. I went to MIT. I found the second smallest major. The smallest major was nuclear engineering, and that seemed really dangerous for me to do with my track record in math and everything else. I became an ocean engineer. I worked on underwater robots, and what I really wanted to do was teach. They didn't used to have teaching of engineering in K through 12 back in the 80s and 90s, so you need a PhD. And I switched coasts, and I went to Caltech, and I worked on underwater propulsion based on how jellyfish swim. But I was a really not great grad student. At Caltech, it was great. They would actually show spreadsheets of where people's grades were without names, and you could find your dot. Turns out someone always has to be the dot furthest to the left, and that was pretty much always me. But I found happy spots where I want to teach. I'm going to get this PhD in robotics. So I was running conferences for middle schoolers and doing things with art galleries and kind of finding my purpose, and it started to kind of click. And then a really lovely friend who was an admin pulled me aside and said, they were talking about you in one of the offices. And I'm like, okay. She must not be a very good graduate student if she's spending her time playing with third graders. Okay, again, I just told you what my grades were. This is probably a valid statement. But I did find a happy place. I used to sneak off at night to Art Center College of Design versus a student then as a faculty member, and actually even got pulled into doing installation art. This is it's hard to see, I think. Maybe you can see it better, but this was data from the Hector Mine earthquake, and sound artist Steve Roden had this idea of building a big sculpture that played the earthquake on children's xylophones and asked me to figure out how to do that with basic stamps. I've added this because if any of you follow this music and art, Steve passed away 2 weeks ago. If you're not familiar with his work, I have a hunch those of you who are at Strange Loop would find Steve Roden's work fascinating. But so I spent my time with the art students and the art faculty, and actually I was so nervous about my dissertation that I invited all my art school friends to come to my PhD dissertation at Caltech. And when it came to the open questions, you should have seen the looks on the faces of my committee, who were great, but they were not used to having 20 artists asking questions about a mechanical engineering PhD. So I wanted to stick this here too, because play and engineering, where am I coming at this? This number is my grad school GPA. I'm not proud of it. I actually threw this in this morning, and I have to drill this home. It's not because I didn't work hard. I was the kid who worked crazy hours, and I couldn't find a way to succeed in these systems. I get a test, I panic. If the class has projects, I got an A. If the class was not project-based, it wasn't an A, and it probably wasn't a B. But I point this out because as a professor, I'm very aware that the grades students get, they take that as a value judgment on themselves. And maybe all of you were straight A students. Tell me what that feels like sometime. But if you weren't, a little secret is, there's a great book called Amateur Hour, College Teaching in America. It turns out that most professors, especially in STEM, don't have any training in pedagogy and assessment and educational psychology. So if someone tells you that you're a failure because you're literally failing their class, I mean, it could be right, but I wouldn't take that to heart too much. And it's taken me 20 years and lots of therapy to understand that maybe that number isn't me. So I moved to Minnesota. I became an engineering professor at a small school near where my husband grew up. And eventually I also joined the business school there. And this is my mission statement. They sent me to a really fancy leadership training, and all the other faculty wrote these lovely, long, glowing things about learning and students and futures. I missed the assignment somehow, and this was literally what I wrote and handed in. It was, I aspire to not mess up too badly, right? Life goal. And I can give this is a talk I couldn't have given in my 20s. Late 40s, I can look back and be like, that all sucked. But we're gonna mess up. And if we're doing new things, how do you not mess up? So I basically became the professor who was trying to prove to herself as a 6-year-old that she could be an engineer also. So what is play? What is engineering? What does that look like if I'm doing research? What does that look like if I'm teaching a class on dynamics? Well, first of all, that word. We use that word a lot, play. You could play Mozart, you could play chess, you could play soccer, you could act in a play, you could play make-believe, you could play house, you could play with blocks. These have very different connotations to me. I would argue that some of them aren't playful. So for the purpose of this talk, in my next 35 minutes, we're in this land. We're gonna talk about this kind of play. And there's 4 things I want you to keep in mind, and I'll keep throwing them up there. Play is about process, not about outcome. When I'm in project manager mode, that's a little scary, because I have to make sure I have an outcome. But if we're truly being playful, it is about process. Think back to what you did when you were a kid and you really felt playful. Play involves freedom of choice. If the people doing it aren't making choices, they're really not playing. Play is often social. Yes, I know you can play things on your own that fit these criteria. For today's talk, we're going to focus on the social, it involves other people version of play. And last, play is joyful. Okay. And were you to walk through our lab's process, we use 4 elements in a checklist. Is there joy? Do people smile? Is there whimsy? If an ice cream cone is joy, then an ice cream cone with candy floss and sprinkles, that's our whimsy. How do we involve new people? That's social. And then where's the element of surprise? Because surprise has lots of great attributes, including engagement. It changes how you think about things. So how does this look in a class? Well, it might be if you have to teach dynamics, which is the study of forces in motion. You've probably swung pendulums before. What does it look like if instead of swinging a pendulum in the basement, you stick your students on a flying trapeze with sensors? Or what does it look like instead of doing reference frame transformations, you put them in a German wheel, do some motion capture, and then analyze their data? We're gonna do harmonic oscillation. You could have a little spring, or you could stick your students 40 feet up bungee trapezes and then have them jump, and then analyze that. You also have to befriend the university's lawyers in the process. And the thing is, okay, where are you going with that? Well, the students are engaged, they're smiling. It also has led to some really cool research. This is a professional trapeze artist that we worked on some sensors to analyze her swing. And there's some hardcore engineering there that wouldn't have happened had I not stuck the sophomores on the German wheel. Okay, well, what else does it look like? Where's whimsy? Well, it might look like this. This is not how I should teach my daughter how to do. This is not how I would choose to teach my daughter how to do circuitry. So I, years ago, wanted to come up with a way to do this. And what we found was, well, instead of soldering irons and circuit boards, what if we create really conductive salty Play-Doh? And what if we create sugary Play-Doh? Could we sculpt circuits? And it works. It turned into a company. Squishy circuits are used around the world now. My students have a company. But once you do that, and if you're really truly thinking process, not outcome, weird things happen. We were working with a restaurant named Alinea in Chicago, and through that we met a pastry chef who's now one of my dearest friends. And she said, well, AnnMarie, the recipes for your Play-Doh that conduct electricity, that's a recipe. Literally, AnnMarie, that's a recipe. Couldn't we make a cake that conducts electricity or plays music or explodes edible confetti? Right. Okay, it can be simpler. It doesn't have to involve a pastry chef. I've now taught more than 80 semesters of the freshman engineering required design and CAD class. They have to do a final project. You could tell them on the syllabus what it is, or you could wait and put them on a school bus the day you launch the project, not telling them where they're going, but telling them what kind of shoes to wear. And maybe the bus is half full of preschoolers when they get on, because they're designing for a museum, and you were also giving the preschool class the same assignment, right? Again, I didn't actually realize it until writing this talk. The student I was imagining, I think, the whole time was this kid who was told that she wasn't going to be good at math and science, and had horrible handwriting. What would she do in class? So we have a great closing keynote tomorrow, right? And we have many great keynotes tomorrow, but I had to throw this in because I've been sent this cartoon many times, and it's now a badge of prize. It says, this is an interdisciplinary program in which physics students try to hit psychology students with pendulums. And the caption is, my professors had an ongoing competition to get the weirdest thing taken seriously under the label interdisciplinary program. I think I'd have a fighting chance in that competition, but that doesn't mean I would be traditionally the best academic. If you ask the business professors, maybe I'm not a real business professor, I'm an engineer, and you ask the engineers, they think I'm business. We're not sure what I am. But I stick by these after 20 years of doing this. And so let's look at this, and I want to dive into 3 projects that I thought relate kind of to the ethos of Strange Loop. Play is about process, not about outcome. That's scary, and we can talk later about how you get to products and make sure that you have a safety net under the trapeze. Play is joyful. Play involves freedom of choice. Play is social. So I love music. When I went to college, I actually minored in music composition, and I was approached by a Twin Cities a cappella group. I should say, when you're the professor who works with circuses and Play-Doh, you get really weird emails, and it's wonderful. And the men's a cappella group, Cantus. Does anyone know Cantus? Fabulous a cappella group. They reached out and they said, AnnMarie, what would you do with that? If you guys and us played together, what would that look like? So we had a meeting. I showed up before them to the coffee shop and made sure that I wired up all of their spoons to play music with a makey-makey. And that was our first intro. And it led to asking this all-men a cappella group. At the time, all of my coders were women. And we said, all right, this is our team. What could we do with this? And they created a really lovely playing around open source music visualization process where you could pick the colors and you could map them to different things. This is early days of it. Oh, this is a good test. You're not hearing anything, are you? Okay, sound. I will keep talking, but I don't think this is properly hooked up, and we're gonna want it when we get to the videos for that 3rd project. Let's see. Well, yeah, so I don't know how to fix it, so if there's someone who wants to jump up here and fix it. Well, it's playing through my speakers, but. Okay, we'll do that for now. Trust me, when we get to the music videos, that might not be the best way to do it. Okay. So we'd have to turn this mic on, guys. Oh, we tested all this earlier. Okay, so let me just talk you through this part. You actually don't need to hear this, but hopefully someone's helping figure out for when we get to, you know what the third part is. What if we have women's group where we match the color to the pitch and we match the size of the bar to their volume? What does it look like if they start singing about kaleidoscopes? And we do the same thing, let's say pitch and color, but let's also talk about how if they get louder, maybe the kaleidoscopes spin. And so this is a project we really loved doing. We did it with schools, we had other people using it. But at the same time, I'm also another big project in our lab. We usually have many projects going, thank you, at once. One of our big projects was working at a very different situation. This is my favorite school I've been collaborating with for 10 years. It's Metro Deaf School. So we've been working with a school that's entirely birth through 20 deaf, hard of hearing, and deaf blind kiddos. And we've been running engineering programs and camps there. We just finished a big coding project with coding curriculum and getting ASL interpretation. But those were two projects going on at the same time. I didn't see a connection to them. Maybe that's silly. Maybe you see that connection. But the best part of play, again, is that I dive in and I just hope that I find the right playmates. And some of those playmates were PBS's TV show Psy Girls. And they came to me and said, well, let's do an episode on code and chords. But for that episode, what if we have the kids learning how to code be the deaf students? And I did point out that this is a music programming thing. And we said, well, let's go with it. Do we have any luck on sound? Okay, but it worked earlier. Okay, well then why don't we keep going? And you know what, this is actually good because I'm gonna show you without sound then. The Psy Girls, a little clip of this, but think about my audience, it doesn't matter. Because we worked with their producers to make sure that it was hard-coded and hard-captioned. Oh, shoot, is this? Yeah, okay, you can just read, you're missing nothing. So play is about process and not knowing what happens next. And usually I would just turn off my slides. But I know how Alex found me as a keynote, and there's a project that I haven't teased yet that I really want to, you'll see, I need my sound. So we'll just patter here. I brought cards, we do magic tricks. Let's see. Are we good? Okay. I'm super nervous, so I don't even know where we were in this. There we go, okay. Okay, so I'm looking at the front row because you're watching and I'm just nervous, so I don't even know. How far did we get in this? Earlier? Let's just go with this, here we go. All right.
I feel like we're able to express ourselves to a larger audience, allowing our audience to understand that deaf people can create things along with music as a way to communicate.
I feel like I'm ready for anything. I teach my family, other people, and generations to come who have never done anything like this. So I see this being passed on. A lot of deaf people feel like they aren't able to appreciate music or have a relationship with music without sound. But this shows that they can. I hope that they see like, oh, I can do this too. And that they will be able to discover the relationship between music and home.
So that was unexpected. I wouldn't have put those things together. But again, I invited the right people to play with, and that episode is beautiful. It's hard captioned. There's different voices for the different folks. I encourage you to watch it. PBS did a fabulous job. But right, this is about process, not about outcome. We trusted our process, that we dove in, The original thing for Contus, we actually only had 4 weeks from the let's meet each other and then let's do a concert for a couple hundred people, right? And we figured out as a team, like what's the bare minimum we can do, and then let's go crazy also. Play is social, right? This is a lot of people involved in this. So this brings me to project 2 of the 3 that I wanted to talk about today. I like coffee. Anyone else? Yes. Okay. I owe my longest, high-profile collaboration to coffee. When I go to expensive conferences and they have fancy coffee, I always try to get the last cup in before I go to the airport because, we paid for it. I went to a conference in 2017, and the person in front of me was also getting coffee. And I figured out who they were because they had spoken at the conference, and I gushed and said, I am such a big fan of your work. And they asked me, well, what do you do? And I'm like, I do education, and I use your stuff in classes and classes with teachers. And they said, well, we should do a project together. You may know the band. That was their lead singer, Damian Kulash, from OK Go. If you don't know OK Go's music videos, they are pretty epic. From Rube Goldberg machines, treadmill, flying in microgravity, the slow motion long. I'm around for 2 days. I've got them all on my laptop. Let me know. I'll show you all of them. But they're amazing science teaching tools, right? If you've watched these, they're incredible. But the guys never really thought of themselves as something for a science classroom. People just figured it out themselves. So we decided to bring in teachers to the room and to create something we call OK Go Sandbox. And so less than a year after we met them, we were launching a website with tools that allow teachers, this is Damian's words, to give teachers whatever tools they need to connect the joy, wonder, and fun in our videos to the underlying concepts that their students are learning. Well, what does that look like? It looks like making sure that everything's classroom appropriate, which maybe isn't the first thing a band thinks about on their YouTube page. But on Sandbox, it's a page where you can go to lessons mapped by standards. You want science class, music class. Are we going to explore sound and sensors? I want to show you one of the videos. This is a short version of one of the videos that we did. This one's exploring sound. I should say Andy, his degree is in computer science. And then we can map that to science standards and art standards and make it so that a teacher can use that in a classroom. It's September still, barely. So I have to show this picture because, again, when you're playing, you don't know how things will happen and worlds keep colliding. September is International Deaf Awareness Month. So the guys are signing here. That's OK Go in American Sign Language. So process, not about outcome. Play is joyful. Play involves freedom of choice, and play is social. I should make a very strong distinction here, though, that play is these things. If you are the manager facilitating play, you have to spend a little time realizing that those are different things. And don't tell a kindergarten teacher, oh, your job must be so much fun. Hopefully they enjoy it, but if you've ever had 35-year-olds that you needed to take care of for an entire day, maybe fun isn't what they're aiming for there. And so sometimes, as a manager, you're facilitating the play of other people. Right? This is a case of this. I worked for the best dean of engineering. At one point, he said, AnnMarie, just keep doing all the fun stuff. And I finally said, I love my job. It's empowering, it's rewarding, but it's actually work. There's method to this. I'm making sure other people play. So the pandemic hit. Damian and I were supposed to actually be in Denmark showing this stuff at a conference, and everything shuts down. And actually, the band put out a music video. Has anyone seen the All Together Now music video? Okay, so they did it in isolation. If you heard the story, actually Damian and his family were quite ill with COVID very early on, and they did this lovely piece of music. Great video, you should watch it. It was a fundraiser. And the Sandbox team, Damian, me, the guys, my team, we all quickly mobilized and said, this is gonna be a while, how do we use Sandbox as a platform here? How can we make learning playful even though we're in a global crisis and kids might not be going to school for another year or two in person? So the first thing we did was a lot of people had remote choirs popping up. You probably saw lots of like remote choir things. Lovely. So the first thing I did was I have a composition student in my lab. I put Claire on it. Claire arranged that new song so that we could freely release the music for choir and pieces. Great. But that's not very playful. It's lovely. I love it. Totally worth doing. But OK Go loves to do things a little extra. And so we had a chat. We said, well, what could we do as Sandbox? And up until this point, OK Go Sandbox had never created music videos. We were very careful when we talk about it. We create content that goes with the music videos. There are OK Go music videos, and there are OK Go Sandbox education materials. But now things are getting messy, and how do we involve more people? So the first thought is, well, we could invite everyone to play with us. We could put the music out, and everyone could record it, and we could edit it really nicely, which probably would have been lovely. But we also were like, but what about art? What about other things? And we thought, well, what if we create a video? What if we create the first OK Go Sandbox music video? And do you think we could get people to sign up to do this? We don't know. So our original goal, Damien and I, in December 2020, we said, do we think we could get 2,500 people to sign up? Because if we divide the video into frames, maybe we should hire an animator. Let's find a cool young animator. Let's hire them. Let's divide it into frames. We can send them off. We can import them in. And if we don't get 2,500 people, AnnMarie's kids know how to color, and we'll figure this out. So we announced it at a conference we were running. And by February, we realized we had a really awesome opportunity, not a problem. Over 10,000 people and counting were still signing up, and we still had time. Well, there's no way we can make an animated music video that makes sense for a 3-minute song with that many frames. You wouldn't see them. So we decided that we couldn't do a music video. We decided right then and there, we're not doing a music video. We're going to do 5. We ended up doing 6. And what we did was we took an animation. I'll show you if you get to see one at the end. But we broke it into individual frames, and then we mailed the frames around the world. Now, we also, though, it's COVID. Some countries weren't even letting mail in. So we were actually we were also doing digital things. And my lab, we kind of jump in and we'll figure it out. It turns out if you want to do seamless animation from pictures that people took on their phones and sent you from around the world, there's a lot of registration issues. My animator friends were aghast, and then they joined us. I should also point out, I'm in the Twin Cities. So we're working on these projects around the time, too, that George Floyd was killed. The gas station on the corner of our campus is burning. So there's a lot going on, and my team is undergrads, and we're going to figure this out, even though we're not in the same place. So we mailed these all out, and it was beautiful. Some of them didn't get back to us. We did still have to color a bunch of them because things got lost. But we started seeing on social media people around the world coloring these, families, others. People got really creative, like beautiful frames. You're noticing there's very different animation styles here because we ended up having to do 5. We hired and paid young animators around the country and around the world. And then my team, man, they were amazing. They had to figure out the software for even managing. We should have realized how hard it is to manage keeping track of 15,000 frames for 5 films that are being mailed around the world, and you're working remotely, and your team's average age is probably 19 and a half. But we ended up, guys, this worked. Spoiler. We worked with Woo-Young Kim, was the first animator we hired, and she put together this beautiful, and you'll see. Actually, she's the second. I don't even know if she knows this. Originally, we were talking to someone, and they got sick, and then we had to scramble, and someone told us about Woo-Young, and her work is amazing. I'm going to show you hers. Then it became really obvious that we needed help, and animator Scott Cook from Disney was helping also, and he was helping me figure out the flow and what software I needed in databases, and he created one himself. And then we found Vanessa Femer, who decided that the song that the guys had put together really reminded her of who are the helpers. So she went off in her direction. All these people, I told them I needed a 3.5-minute animation, and they had about 2 weeks. It turns out that's not a reasonable timeline, and they're all incredible. Megan Kim jumps on as well. She's in LA. And we decided we were going to launch this for Yuri's night. So we needed to do something weird and spacey. So we also had a giant praxinoscope built, and 3,200 of the frames, 2,500, I forget, of the frames were actually on postcards that eventually went to space with Blue Origin, but also were then filmed in a praxinoscope, because why not at this point? And okay, we got the videos. Not videos, we've got the frames. What do we do now? Well, we need music. And we could have used the guys' music, or we could have used the sheet music and send it around the world and ask people to do parts. That would be too easy, and why do that at this point? So instead, what the team did, as amazing music education and composition students, music composition students on my team, they took the song, broke it into components and beats and lead sheets and different voice parts, and they posted it on the web and said, hey, if you want to like make music with whatever you think you can make music with to one of these and then like send it to us, we'll do something with it. Like, what could go wrong? Over 400 music submissions came in from around the world. And we wanted to make it easy for people because, again, this is 2020. So we said video, sound file, you name it. Again, I'm like thankful to our legal team at the university because you can imagine all the permissions I'm needing at this point. And we also started noticing that these videos coming in were incredible. Like, we're just going to use the sound, but like we have videos that are just, we have hurdy-gurdy. We've got kids who are making art with it. We have tap dancers doing the percussion parts. So what can we do with this? Well, you pull together a team. The director who had been working with our team from the beginning, director Jeff Shelton, who's a long behind-the-scenes person for OK Go. If you've watched their behind-the-scenes videos, Jeff probably directed them. Jeff actually said, let's use the videos. So the ones that have videos, let's find a way to create a virtual choir on a stage. If you watch this version, there's a nice twist at the end that took some COVID planning. But Jeff worked on this one. Now, I've talked to quite a few of you over the last 24 hours at events and this morning. A lot of people here are into music. So imagine this for a second sonically. You've sent things out and told people around the world to send in like whatever they want, like hurdy-gurdy, banging on the table. Go for it. How do you make that make sense for sound? And how do you then string it into a cohesive video without faking it? I'm just gonna let him say it. This is our music producer, who is incredible. And he's gonna say these words.
Sit back and listen. Once I said that, it's time to retreat back. I love hearing all the different personalities and perspectives, juxtaposing against each other. So many lovely and unexpected ways.
So he took every single, like our team, I had a team of students, education majors, who looked at every incoming piece and labeled like, which part of the song are they doing? What instrument? Like, what octave? Maybe something about like, not skill, but like, what's the timbre of that? Like, how do we make this into something you want to listen to? And you can imagine, even if you just piece the parts together, it doesn't become music yet. This is Luke's first pass at it. And he included everything that was sent. I mean, it's not bad. It would have been pretty cool. We could have stopped there. One music video, one song. But again, not really the style of any of the folks involved in this project. So if you go on Spotify and go to OK Go Sandbox, you'll find we ended up doing 5 versions of this song. And Luke is a wizard, and he invited everyone to play, but then he turned these into songs. So one you're going to hear. I'll play this at the end. But then, what does it look like if we got all these string instruments? Like, this could be an orchestra, and the lyrics are great. So what if we invited, maybe you'll recognize the voice. Like, what kind of voice could we use to start this off? And we ended up with this one. Oops. So the author Neil Gaiman chipped in a vocal here. But then we were able to use this choir. None of these kids are in the same room or country. And we even found a young vocalist in Boston. The pianist is in New Jersey. Right. And then, what happens if we are like, let's go techno, let's bring in some college students who do electronic music and some beatbox kid hosts. Or you need a third version. So we ended up getting to 5. And the magic thing to me, if you don't know anything about music, is that we didn't have the song to start with. Luke had a framework and then hoped the pieces would come in to make that work into something. So I'd encourage you to go check out the music. We're pretty proud of them. There's something else. If you think back to when you were a kid, hopefully even to this day, but when you were a kid, you might have picked people to play with. And sometimes you pick the kid to play with who has the best toys. Has anyone done that? Remember, I'm the kid who didn't have internet. That's why I had to like read all the MIT stuff and not know that people were upset about it. I had friends with internet, right? Like video games. But finding the kid with the good toys doesn't really last, right? I always joke in industry and in academia, we often talk about collaboration, and sometimes it means like, I ran into a problem and that person has the software that I need, and so we collaborated. Like, no, they fixed your problem. Real collaboration is like you're in this together, and if I think back to the best play experiences I had, it wasn't because someone had the cool toys, it was like I liked being around that person. So a key thing is you really want to choose, who do you choose to play with? Right? And that applies to so many things. And this is another one of those, like, she couldn't have planned this if she tried. Luke Tozier was actually the linchpin on that project. He was also one of the most important people on Code and Chords. I didn't meet Luke recently. Actually, I met Luke when I was 10, and he was my friend then. Like, we used to play about stuff, and then went our different ways. He became a musician. I went off and became an engineer, but like, ironically, now we're in our 40s as parents, and we're doing projects together still, right? Because play is about process, not about the outcome. Some of our stuff doesn't work, but we still know that we enjoyed the process. We liked being with each other and working on it. There's joy, even when it's hard, even when we're in the middle of a pandemic. Play involves freedom of choice. It wouldn't have been playful to me if we had totally assigned in advance how we were gonna do this music video. It could have been artistically stunning. We could have cast and assigned everything, but we only did that when we needed like a vocal here or something. Everything else was what we got, and we used everything that we got. We didn't use every video, but we used the audio from every video. So as we go into the end here, my lab also has 3 rules. And I have this hunch, if you ask the over 100 students who've worked in my lab over the years to list the 4 elements of play, I hope that they would tell you joy, whimsy, new people, and surprise, but I wouldn't bet a lot of money on it. Like, some of them are gonna forget it, that wasn't what they did. But there are 3 things that every student in my lab, I would bet this right now, could tell you what the 3 lab rules are. Right? We put these on everything. Like, we have some meetings talking about, like, what does this mean in a software context? What does this mean in a working at the Children's Museum context? Be kind. Like, you don't know what people are dealing with. Right? I'm being really honest in this talk and showing you the true flow of things. But if I gave this talk 10 years ago, it'd be a very different place. Like, I am here because I had mentors who believed in me. I've got a really awesome partner and a really good therapist. Because if you're constantly convinced you're the worst person in the room in every topic you do, you start to really doubt that. And maybe I am the worst person in the room in the things I do, but I've managed to pull them together in a new way. But be kind, because you don't know what everyone's dealing with. Play well with others. We could talk for hours. The last one, clean up your messes, is a big one. That might mean literally clean up the art supplies in the preschool when you're done. That might mean there's paint on the wall, like, how do we get it off? But really, it also might mean this project did not work the way we wanted it to. We didn't live up to what the partner wanted, or we made mistakes. How do we apologize? How do we accept that you can't do something new and know how it's gonna end? You just can't, right? Like, that means you already know the whole path. And if we're about process, not outcome, you're gonna spend a lot of time apologizing. And you learn how to do that. You learn how to figure out, like, how do I build the safety net under the trapeze? Even if we're flying without safety lines, I want a net there, and how do we build those nets? And we spend a lot of time preemptively thinking about what are the messes we're gonna run into by doing new things. And if you don't want to clean up messes, you probably shouldn't do new things, right? So back to the title of this talk, playing with engineering. I was trying to tell you about play and engineering, and I realized in many ways, maybe what I've been doing my entire life is playing with engineering. If I couldn't be the typical engineer, like, what does it mean? So what does the kid who talk about process, not outcome, I don't know what I'm doing here. Like, why am I in the snow on my tricycle on the grass, not the street? But like, what's the worst that can happen in this case? Not a lot. And I'm sure I had a blast that day. How do I create an engineering and an education culture that, like, my 2 kids, this has been years ago, but like, that they could be part of regardless of their interests? How do we create, ways of doing these big, huge projects such that even though there's chaos around us, my team knows they have each other. They still have their playmates, right? They still have the people that they can laugh with. One of my favorite moments from this project, which from a scheduling standpoint should have been a nightmare, was that we found out that the verdict of the George Floyd trial was going to come the week that my team is on campus working on this. And someone got word of that, and the next thing you know, I had an email, and they said, AnnMarie, just FYI, we shut down the lab because some people were in person. Everyone at home, we decided that's what we should do because we don't know how things are gonna go. We'll pick it up tomorrow. And then a 19-year-old knew to do that without even checking with me first. Like, even though we had a deadline, like, that's playing well with others. So I want to end on a music video. What does it look like when you jump in and ask the world to collaborate? It could look like this.
Andy, Tim, Dan, you guys ready?
Yep.
Yep. All right, and you rolling, Maggie?
Yep.
You guys gonna actually do the pages now, right?
Yep.
Okay. Here we go. In the first few weeks of the pandemic, OK Go wrote and recorded a song together, alone in our homes.
A few months later, a high school choir from Long Island asked for the sheet music so they could collaborate from their homes the same way.
We loved that idea and invited the world to join.
The video you're about to see is one of 6 new pieces made by more than 15,000 musicians, artists, and students from 35 states and 21 countries.
Everything's untouched, but forever changed. Everything's untouched, but forever changed. Everything's untouched, but forever changed.
They look so different now. And all those harmonies we sang yesterday all sound so different somehow. Though they're all still the same. Everything's untouched, but forever changed. Everywhere on earth, every single soul, everyone there is all together now. And everyone alone, all together on the precipice. All that mattered then, all that matters now, all that matters after the world shuts down. All of it dissolved, all together in the chrysalis. Together in the chrysalis. Nothing changes until one day it does. Then there's no going back. Our best selves and our worst selves live in that moment there. Sparring over who draws the new man. And though they may look the same, everything depends on who wins that game. Everywhere on earth, every single soul, everyone there is all together now. And everyone alone, all together on the precipice. All that mattered then, all that matters now, all that matters after the world shuts down. All of it dissolved, all together in the chrysalis. Together in the chrysalis. All together now, all together now, all together alone in the chrysalis. We're all together now, all together now, all together alone in the chrysalis. We're all together now, all together now, all together alone in the chrysalis. We're all together now, all together now, all together alone in the chrysalis. We're all together now, all together now, all together alone in the chrysalis. We're all together now, all together now, all together alone in the chrysalis. We're all together alone.
And so I'll end there. Thank you all so much for inviting me here. I really have heard about this conference for years and have been nervous for like months. But I hope you have an incredibly playful couple of days. Thank you.